Wogan.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for giving up your Saturday night to join me. And my particular thanks to the chair manufacturer who sent me his catalogue this week. Very, very considerate, sir. We'll take your ideas on board. Now, I'm sure you'll be interested to meet my guests, a particularly interesting bunch this week. The emphasis is on the colonial. We have a young lady who started as a model, then went on to be a singer and an actress, but is most fondly remembered in this country for knocking 7 bells out of Russell Harty. That's Grace Jones. Another gentleman who's known for his pugilistic tendencies, but is also regarded as the high priest of American literature. That's Norman Mailer. One of America's finest pop singers, singing one of her biggest hits. That's Roberta Flack. First of all, a gentleman who, not content with sewing up the quote market, has also cornered the graffiti and is now concentrating on boobs and blunders. I'm delighted to welcome Nigel Rees. This book, dealing of boobs and blunders, I was displeased to see, features me.
Yes, on this very show.
Yes?
I think it was in the very first series, after I'd been on, and you'd made a blunder about me. Do you remember what you said to me?
What did I say?
You said to me, what does your father... I can't do your voice, but what does your father make of you hanging around in all these lavatories collecting graffiti? Him being a clergyman. And he's not a clergyman. So that was the first one.
That was the first one.
Then
That's not like me.
Then you moved on, and you hit the heights with Marvin Hamlish, to whom you said, did you enjoy writing Company? And he hadn't.
I remember he offered to do an impersonation of Stephen Sondheim.
I think he got out of it very graciously.
Yes, he did, which is more than I did. What is this boobs and blunders thing? Another rich vein you've tapped.
I think so. Dentopedology is the name I think that Prince Philip gave to it, which is the business of opening your mouth and putting your foot in it. And people do it. Politicians do it. Broadcasters do it. Television chat show hosts
Never.
do it. Yes, even.
Even them, eh?
And especially disc jockeys. And one of my favorite examples is from an Irish disc jockey. It wasn't you. A few years ago, I was driving around the southern part of Ireland, listening to RTE, and there was an Irish disc jockey who was finding it rather difficult to read the writing on the postcard that he had in front of him. And he said, and I got a request here from Sean O'Flaherty from County Sligo, who was 111 recently. Would you believe that, ladies and gentlemen? Sean O'Flaherty from County Sligo, who was... Oh, no, who was ill recently. That is not an Irish joke. I heard that with my own ears. A wonderful example.
This was the kind of blunder that I used to make with the onset of middle age and the loss of binocular vision, you know, when you're too proud to wear the glasses. And I was misreading a great deal of cards, and that's what happens. The theory of the Freudian slip.
Yes.
Is that one you subscribe to, that is really in the back of our minds? It's a slip we want to make.
I think there may be something in it, that something happens in one's subconscious. I was recording an edition of a show I do on Radio 2 called Where Were You in '62, which is, you know, 50s and 60s.
Are they still doing that?
Well, we're doing another series which will be on there very shortly.
Grand.
But we've been recording
yes,
away, yes. And I wanted to mention, for whatever reason, Dudley Moore. And I was just going to say that his nickname now was that he was the Hollywood sex thimble. Not a very strong joke, as the audience here...
Yes, quick.
I have to say, and of course I was talking about Dudley Whore. Now then, not a very nice thing to say. I think they left it in the recording, but I have a funny feeling that something about sex and perhaps whores got into it, and that was the reason why I made that slip.
Yes, there are certain things that you have to be very, very careful of when you're reading racing bulletins,
yes.
Particularly. I won't go into them in any great detail, but is there anything we can do to protect ourselves from the old foot in the mouth?
I don't think there is, no. And I think we ought to go on doing it. And the more serious the situation in which the blunder occurs, the better, particularly if it's in a rather serious news bulletin. You see, if you and I make a mistake on the radio, we can make a joke about it.
Well, I play a record.
Well, yes, or you say, oh, I made a mess, you know,
Yeah.
something like that. But if you're reading the news, you can't break on saying, oh, I made a mess. And there was a priceless example done by a BBC newsreader who, amazingly enough, is still in employment. And it wasn't his fault, because it was whoever wrote the news bulletin. You remember a few years back, there was a murderer who was dubbed by the popular press the Black Panther. And he was eventually brought to book. And at the 6 o'clock news one night, the newsreader went on and said, at Oxford Crown Court today, Donald Nielsen denied being the Pink Panther. That is one for the archives. And it gets even worse when you go to something like the BBC World Service. You know the BBC World Service? They all have voices like this and have names like J. Barrington's.
Reverberating round the colonies.
And around the BBC Club as well, yes. And they say things like, BBC World Service, the news read by J. Barrington Smythe. And there was one from the last American election which was, Mr. Ronald Reagan has lost his head over President Carter. Mr. Ronald Reagan has lost his lead over President Carter.
Yeah. And what about, you've culled them from all over the world, obviously, haven't you?
Well, from the various countries and from various sources. And it's not just the sort of things which are said in public, you know, by politicians or by broadcasters. It's those little things that you also hear in everyday life. You know, if you go around keeping your ears open, you hear the most wonderful mistakes that people make with the language. For example, a bookseller, I think it was, in Leicester, told me that somebody had come into his shop and said, have you got a copy of Thomas Hardy's novel, Tess of the Dormobiles? The wonderful thing about that is the wonderful visual image you get. I mean, you can't wait to see the movie. Nastasia Kinski with the Dormobile, that sort of thing. And overheard remarks, particularly from American tourists, because American tourists, bless their souls, they have very loud voices. They don't mutter like as we do when we go abroad, and you can hear every goddamn word they say. And there was a priceless one, I was told, by somebody who had overheard two American matrons standing in Park Lane in London, and they were looking at, there's a very big statue of Achilles there, quite well endowed, fending off the lightning, and it's, as an educational note, I'm sure you'd like for your program.
Please.
At this point.
Yeah.
It was...
it certainly needs something.
It was raised by the... It was raised... Now, there's a little slip there. It was raised...
Was that deliberate, or was it just an accident?
A Freudian slip.
Freudian.
It was erected.
That's all right, I'm going to get letters about the sexual content of this program again next week.
Yes. Anyway, the women of London put up this statue of Wellington, and he could see it from his bedroom window. But this is, by the way, this is by way of preamble to the fact that they were looking up at this big statue of Achilles in Park Lane, and one was overheard saying to the other, "No, dear, Big Ben is a clock." Wonderful, wonderful source. This is everyday life. This is not politicians abroad.
No, I mean, I get so many contributions to my radio program, the same thing, malapropisms and all
Yes.
sorts of foot in the mouths. And, many show people have catchphrases, haven't they? I
Yes.
mean, are they a fruitful source for you? Or is...
Well, I mean, the thing is that, all right, one does collect these funny things that people say, but I also have a slightly serious side. I try and find out where the bits and pieces of phrases and lingo that people use come from. And
So you have intellectual pretensions.
I wouldn't say that. For example, I listened very closely to your radio program.
Ah.
And,
Well, you're just trying to be the common man now, aren't you?
well, I think we're all very sorry to hear this week that, you know, the days are numbered. But anyway, you
It
see,
comes hard
Yeah,
after
yes.
all these years to get the push, after all the service I've given.
Quite so. 12 years, was it?
Engineered by Jimmy Young, of course.
Anyway.
Another abuser of the language.
Ah, yes, but that's another point. The thing is, I listen to you, and I hear you use all sorts of strange little phrases and idioms. And I wonder where you've got them from. Is it you plucking up things from all the things you've read in the past?
Yes, I'm dredging it up from the self-conscious. Yes.
That's right.
Things like "stap me vital."
Well, that's right.
I don't know where I saw that phrase.
And one more, well, yes, that's a very good example. What is it? I mean, where does it come from? And also bits of sort of golf club slang, if I may call them that. And one day, 2 years ago, I sat down and listened to the whole program.
Without being ill once?
Slight brain damage, but apart from it. And I made a list of all the idioms that you used. It's quite a short list, if I can get it out.
I'm the one who uses the idiot voice.
No, this is the list of your sayings, you see. It's just quite a short list.
A fragrant nosegay.
Yes, these are all the things you say. Things like, easy now, easy. Now, what is that? Is a boy's own
Well,
paper?
no, that's very British, isn't it? When things are getting tough, you say, steady the buffs.
That's right.
Yes, pull yourself together, woman. Stuff like that.
Dashed glad of your company, I can tell you. Yes, another of yours.
Well, that's very civil. I think that's awfully civil and very, very clubby.
Yeah, each to his own, as I always say. Jack Scott, this shows how old it is, the 5th of March, 1982. Jack Scott, weather forecaster extraordinaire. One of those cliché phrases. Swines, it's dog eat dog in this business.
It's, as has been proved this week.
A double one here. Now, this makes an interesting point. I think 82 was the World Cup in Spain. Yeah.
That's right, yes, will we ever forget it?
Well, yeah, and this was before it happened, referring to the forthcoming unpleasantness on the Iberian Peninsula. Now, Iberian Peninsula is a very good example of the way people always would prefer to use two words instead of one, so you say that instead of Spain. And I don't know whether perhaps in saying the forthcoming unpleasantness, you were alluding to something. People sometimes talk about the last war, whether it's the Falklands, late unpleasantness.
Yes, the last unpleasantness, when we hurled back the Hun.
That's right, and I tried to find out where this came from, and it seems the first example I came across was from an American with the most extraordinary name called Petroleum C. Naseby, which I suspect was a pen name. Anyway, he referred to the American Civil War as the late unpleasantness. So you see, it's all this sort of stuff, and one of the things I like doing is tracing where these wonderful sayings come from. But you asked me about catchphrases originally.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yes.
I mean, will any of those go? I suppose they have gone down, like "Can you hear me, mother?" and stuff.
That's right, and people still use them, but they perhaps forget where they come from. And I've been doing a book recently, it was looking at the sayings of the 20th century and trying to find out where they come from. And for example, a saying which people don't use anymore, like "nice one, Cyril." You know, everybody was saying it 10 years ago. I think they probably think it has something to do with football now. But in fact, it started in a TV commercial for bread. And it suddenly took off,
I always
just
thought
like
it was
that.
Cyril Knowles.
Oh, that was after. It started in the TV commercial, you see.
Are you sure about
Yes.
the chronology?
It's in my
there?
book. It must be true. Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
if we had an audience, I'd hurl that question over. They're all on tape, of course.
It is very difficult always tracing things back. People will always say, oh, you know, somebody else, oh, Shakespeare said it first. But one has a try. One tries to...
Yeah. What are your famous? What's your favourite, your personal favourite among all the collation of ringing phrases?
Well, I think one has to say that, you know, through the 20th century, it started off with the sort of Churchills and Lloyd Georges who gave speeches from platforms, and it was wonderful. Now, it's gone full circle, to use another phrase. You now have politicians speaking in television studios rather than on the platform, and it is their boobs and blunders which get remembered. If you ask me who of the proper speakers I speak of, I mean, Kennedy, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, these are all wonderful things. People trying to say something memorably and well, but nowadays, what happens? You have politicians who have teams of speech writers. They don't say anything memorable at all, and in fact, the only thing that is memorable about their utterances is when they get them wrong. When you have President Carter at the 1980 Democratic Convention in New York, he was accepting the renomination, and he wanted to evoke some of the names of the people in the Democratic Party who hadn't become president. And he wanted to mention particularly the name of Hubert Horatio Humphrey. And he said, that great Democrat who never got to the White House, Hubert Horatio Hornblower. No wonder he didn't get elected, really.
Well, President Reagan of beloved memory,
Yes.
He's done a couple, hasn't he?
Yes, he went to, I think it was, well, let's say he went to Brazil, and at a state banquet he said, I want to drink a toast to the people of Peru. And he said, no, not Peru, Colombia. And it wasn't Colombia, because he was, and it was a terrible mess. Gerald Ford did one when Anwar Sadat, president of Egypt, was at the White House. He said, I want to drink a toast to the people of Israel. Wonderful stuff.
It has been. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Nigel.
Jerry.
It's much. Next, one of the great names in American literature, the winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes for literature, I'm delighted to welcome Norman Mailer.